A story about a human slaughterhouse so horrifying that it still gives people chills to this day. Have you ever imagined that a human slaughterhouse could actually exist? In a quiet suburban area of Serbia, a terrifying hidden room remained undiscovered for years. What investigators eventually found inside was far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. On the concrete floor stood a massive industrial meat grinder. But this machine wasn't used for livestock. So what was it used for? Was it meant for human beings? How did detectives and law enforcement uncover the truth behind this operation and bring the people responsible to justice? What experienced detectives witnessed inside that room left them psychologically scarred for life. The discovery was so disturbing that it threatened to shake an entire European government to its core. This is the story of a ruthless gang of football hooligans and how they transformed into one of Europe's most feared criminal syndicates. A shadow empire built on terror, state-level protection, and a horrifying secret that remained hidden for years. When people began disappearing without a trace, as if they had simply vanished into thin air, a small group of determined investigators realized they weren't just fighting a gang, they were taking on an entire system. And time was running out. How did this nightmare begin? And when did it all start? To understand that, you have to look beneath the surface of Belgrade's football culture. In Serbia, football ultra groups are more than just fan clubs. They are highly organized, intensely loyal brotherhoods. Then, in the late 2010s, one man rose above everyone else in this underworld. A man named Veljko Belivuc. He was imposing, highly intelligent, and utterly ruthless. Under his leadership, a well-known supporters group gradually transformed into a tightly disciplined paramilitary-style drug cartel. They took control of entire neighborhoods, dominated security operations at major nightclubs, and tightened their grip on the highly profitable drug trafficking routes running through the Balkans. Before long, their criminal empire was on the rise. But Belivuk's gang had a secret weapon that seemed to make them untouchable, an advantage so terrifying that it struck fear into their enemies long before any violence occurred. Anyone who dared to stand against them didn't just suffer consequences. They simply vanished. No body was ever found. No crime scene. No evidence. Before long, panic began to spread. Police files on missing persons kept piling up, but every investigation seemed to hit a dead end. It was as if a black hole had opened in the heart of Belgrade, swallowing anyone who dared to cross their path. No one could understand what was happening or how it was being done. As time passed, the year 2020 arrived, a year in which Belgrade had become consumed by fear and uncertainty. Young men, rival gang leaders, and even ordinary citizens who insulted the gang would suddenly disappear in broad daylight. The pattern was always the same: a phone call, a meeting arranged through a trusted friend, a ride in an unmarked vehicle, and then silence. Families pleaded for answers, but the streets remained silent. The message was unmistakable: stay quiet or you'll be next. But behind the scenes, a major effort to bring Belgrade's gang network down was already underway. A small but highly skilled and determined team of investigators refused to give up. They committed themselves fully to the case and began tracing the last known GPS signals of the missing persons. Despite countless obstacles, every lead eventually pointed to the same location. It was a heavily fortified house, protected almost like a fortress, located in the quiet and otherwise. Eventually, detectives became convinced that this was the key location they had been searching for. They began planning an intensive surveillance operation, and as they watched the property from the shadows, they knew they might finally be getting close to the truth. But they were facing a terrifying reality. They couldn't simply storm the house. The gang's network seemed to have eyes everywhere, and its members were constantly on alert. Their influence allegedly extended so far that informants and sympathizers could even be found within the very institutions tasked with investigating them. One wrong move could have tipped off the suspects and allowed crucial evidence to disappear forever. Investigators needed a breakthrough. They were searching for a way to monitor the gang's communications without triggering any alarms or alerting its members. Then, thousands of miles away, a major international intelligence operation handed them exactly the key they had been looking for. Eventually, Western intelligence agencies managed to breach the highly encrypted smartphone network known as SkyECC, a platform widely used by drug traffickers and contract killers around the world. For years, Belivuk and his closest associates believed the network was completely secure and impossible for law enforcement to penetrate. They were so confident in its secrecy that they didn't just exchange messages about their crimes, they documented them as well. When international agents decrypted the servers and handed the data over to Serbian investigators, complete silence filled the room. What they discovered was horrifying because the messages contained hundreds of high-definition images and videos that no one had ever imagined. What the detectives saw on the screens didn't just solve the case. It exposed a level of brutality that no one was prepared for. And then the moment arrived when preparations began for the downfall of the Belivuk gang. In February 2021, after detectives finally obtained encrypted evidence, hundreds of heavily armed elite police officers launched an operation. That's when the Belgrade gang's downfall began. Police raided the house in Redopek, broke through walls, and tore up the floors, and eventually, they found what they had been searching for. In the basement, behind a hidden partition, was a killing chamber.
And then a horrifying scene was revealed that left everyone in shock. There was a professional, industrial-style execution chamber inside. Thick plastic sheets were lined on the walls, and in the center of the room stood a large industrial meat grinder. SkyECC images exposed that terrifying reality. The gang would kidnap their rivals and bring them to this house, torture them for hours, then kill them and use the machine to erase all evidence. The remains were later dumped into the nearby Danube River. It was, in a sense, a perfect crime. After that, the real game began. Belivuk and his close associates were arrested and placed in maximum security cells. The criminals were behind bars. But when investigators further analyzed the decrypted phones, their confidence quickly disappeared. Because those messages didn't only implicate the gang. The decrypted data revealed a web of corruption that reached the highest levels of the Serbian state. There were direct communications and exchanges with senior cartel security officials, police chiefs, and influential politicians. The gang hadn't just found a way to evade the law, they had the protection of the law itself. They operated like a shadow enforcement arm for powerful figures removing rivals, maintaining control over streets and neighborhoods, and receiving full protection and immunity in return. And then came the final phase, the complete end. Belivuk and his inner circle were removed from the streets and sentenced to harsh punishments, including life imprisonment. The terrifying house in Redopek now stands abandoned and silent. But as the dust settles over Belgrade, one cold and troubling question still lingers in the air. The gang's foot soldiers are in prison, but the influential figures who supported them, opened doors for them, and used their terror for political gain are still free. And in the underground world of the Balkans, when one empire falls, another is already waiting to take its place.